everyone to East Shore Unitarian Church. On behalf of the Earth and Climate Action Ministry team, of which I'm a member, we welcome you. I'd like to, at the very outset, thank, first of all, of course, the speakers for coming, taking the time. Thank all of you for coming, taking part of your Sunday afternoon to join us. I'd like to thank the various volunteers that put it together, all the people who tabled, also the Earth and Climate Action Ministry teams. Jenny Hall, who is our chair, you want to wave? Okay. And Mark Norelius, John Schmey, he's up helping us with sound, Christy Weir, Linda Brown, Sarah Bergdahl, Ann Fletcher, wave, and others who are sort of off in the background. Sorry? Oh, my name is Marilyn Mayers. I don't know if I mentioned that. Yeah. Okay. So we will have speakers, limited time. We have a timekeeper, Jenny. And I do also want to thank Lee Windstrom for helping us with audio. It seems to be working perfectly. There is food and drink, so let me just go over a couple logistics. If you leave the sanctuary and go to the right, there's food and drink, so please help yourself. Feel free to do what you never need to do. There's food and drink, and then to the left are bathrooms. So just be aware of that. So I hope you'll be able to have a chance to talk to the various people who are tabling. We, in the face of federal inaction or regression, we really believe deeply that focus has to be on local and regional issues. So thank you all for coming. It means you care, and that's what we need. We need to build a community of people who care. So thank you again. I want to very briefly introduce who we have on your program, if you have it. One person is, the bios are there, but there's one person missing. So first of all, of course, welcome Claudia Balducci, King County Council. Vicky Raya from Climate Equity, King County. Christine Cooley is Executive Director of the Puget Sound Clean Energy Agency. And then Court Olson, who is going to be our MC and very active in all sorts of ways with climate action. So with that, I hand it over to Court.
Thanks, Marilyn. I want to introduce each speaker and let you know that we've got the speakers set up for 20-minute presentations, followed by 10 minutes of Q&A, and then we'll move right along to the next speaker. So 3 speakers and then me, and then we'll be done and you can circulate, navigate the different tables as you wish. So the first speaker today, we're very glad to have Claudia Balducci, King County council member, longtime council member, and current candidate for King County executive. Previously, she was chair of the county council as well as chair of the Puget Sound Regional Council. And prior to joining the county council, she served as a Bellevue City Council member as well as mayor. Over many years, Claudia has demonstrated leadership and been a strong advocate for regional public transit, affordable housing, public safety, and climate action. So please welcome Claudia Balducci.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, Court. Thank you all for being here on a Sunday afternoon and talking about this really important issue. I'm delighted to join you. I've been introduced, but I am Claudia Balducci, and in addition to all of the work roles I have held, I am a mom. I am a resident of this county and this community. I am a husband. I care about the future of our world. I want it to be a place that our young ones can grow up in and enjoy the way we have. And so this issue that we're here to talk about today of climate change is just, it is existential and it is very important, and we need to do better for future generations. So I'm very, very delighted to be here to talk to you about it. And I'll say I try to be inspirational. I try to leave people with a feeling of like, we can do this. I'm very deeply concerned about where we're going on climate action in our world and in our country, certainly. The challenge before us is enormous, and it's getting harder, not easier. We're not meeting our goals. And that was when we had all levels of government pulling on the oars more or less in the same direction. We were not meeting our goals. Now we have a federal government that is actively hostile to these goals. And so I think if there's a takeaway from gatherings like this, it's we all have to redouble our efforts at every level. I did not bring PowerPoints. I apologize for that, so I'll just tell you where I'm going so you don't sit there wondering when is she ever going to be done. I'm going to talk a little bit about our work to date, some of what we've been doing at the local level over the last several years. Then what next? What are our really big challenges and some specific things I'd like to highlight? And then finally, you know, how do we do this together? So three parts to this talk. When I first started working in climate, I was on the Bellevue City Council. I was a city council member of a moderate-sized city, you know, globally small city. And whenever we talked about the environment or big picture challenges like climate, the main reaction that we had was, that is a global challenge. We cannot make a difference at the local level. We are too small. And that was sort of what we heard. And I think some of that was about truth. Some of that was a recognition that a bunch of small actions felt unlikely to add up to the total change we needed to make, but some of it was an excuse, right? We voted on climate actions a number of times while I was on the city council, and it started with a split vote, no on anything. This is not our job. We had people who didn't want to take this up as an issue. Then it was a split vote, yes, and now we are a unanimous council here, our council that represents those of us who live in Bellevue, unanimously vote yes on climate action. So we have moved the political needle quite a bit. And I'm proud of being part of that. Some may remember that this movement really got started, this local movement for climate action, because of Seattle Mayor Greg Nichols, who became a national and even international champion for the Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement. I am very proud to have been the mayor of Bellevue who signed that agreement on behalf of the city of Bellevue. Yes. And that was just the beginning of a journey. It was the beginning of a journey where we started to learn how to do this thing called climate action. I was also the mayor who got to sign on to the K4C, and I'm going to get it all wrong. I might have to ask Jay Arnold to help me out here. King County Cities Climate Collaboration. There we go. K4C. And that was a really groundbreaking move, spearheaded by former now executive Dow Constantine, and which really started to build leadership and momentum among all of the cities of King County working together. Now that's a bigger metro area. That's several million. That's over 2 million people. Now we're really making a difference if we work together well. And then each of the local jurisdictions started to build their own climate plans. The city of Bellevue has a climate plan. Most cities have a climate plan. We worked with People for Climate Action in their initiative really to come up with a toolkit that we could give to smaller cities so they could have what they needed to create their own climate action plans. And little by little we built up actions to try to make a difference, even just creating all of those little rocks that build up to a pile. One example I'm particularly proud of is the Solarize programs. Maybe some of you have done it. We have solar panels on our roof. That was my husband went into a zero emissions phase where he just sort of like pulled off the walls, put in all of the insulation, put panels on the roof. And we are learning to be less climate impactful ourselves. At King County, we've been adopting increasingly stringent green building codes in keeping with state policy, which means that future buildings and building retrofits make that sector cleaner and more climate friendly. We have a major initiative to electrify all of our King County metro buses by 2035. And that's big, that's a lot of investment. Thank you. We also are investing in things that are helping people to make different decisions about how we get around, so we can choose to not drive gas-guzzling single-occupancy vehicles, which is a huge contribution to climate emissions. So I fight for trails. I mean, thank you. I like this guy. Thank you, sir. I am glad to have you here today. chose to be a bicyclist myself, although these days I have to go too many places. I've been driving way too much, but you can get around by bikes and transit because of the work that we are doing to make it easier for people to travel. In 2012, we wrote our very first strategic climate action plan at King County. You're going to hear more about that from the experts later, but it includes a whole lot of really ambitious goals and activities. Our goal is to reduce countywide greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2030 and 80% by 2050 compared to our 2007 baseline. And we're doing all kinds of things to reach that goal. We reached our goal of planting 1 million trees. Now our next target is 3 million trees. That helps to sequester carbon, yes. We've preserved almost 200,000 acres of green space in our large county, which is another climate strategy. And we're focusing on the built environment, which is one of the biggest causes of of greenhouse gas emissions. If you know me at all, you probably know that I have been fighting for green transportation options my entire time in office. We have opened light rail here in East King County after decades of battle. In just a few days, I hope to see you all there. On May 10th, we will open 2 more stations to Overlake Village and downtown Redmond. Yeah. And then in just a few more months, across the bridge connecting to the rest of the system so we can go to Judkins Park and Seattle and all of the rest of the system. Yes, yes, sir. But it's not just about transit and buses and trains. We also need to adapt our transportation system so it, generally speaking, is more sustainable and more accessible. Both of these things are important. In recent years, we have had a real push from advocates like the Disability Rights Washington, who remind us that almost 25–30% of people in King County cannot drive. They're too young, or they're disabled, or they've aged out of driving, and so and our system is just not really very accessible to those folks. So here's another thing you can do. Once a year, I believe it's in September, they sponsor something called A Week Without Driving, and they challenge everyone to put aside their car for an entire week and act as if you could not drive ever. You're allowed to ask for rides and ask for help, but if you do, you have to imagine what if that was your life all the time, right? And it's a real challenge to think about getting around without a car at all. But it helps us, especially as policymakers, to figure out how to create a transportation system that does not depend on single occupancy vehicles. So that's something that I've enjoyed doing for a number of years, and it's helped me in my policy focus. Another climate strategy, which people often don't think about as climate strategy, is housing. A large part of the reason people have to travel such long distances is because they can't live near where they want to live. They can't afford to live there. So I've been a strong champion for what we call transit-oriented development, or TOD, putting more homes right next to transit, where people can walk out their front door, get on a light rail train or a bus, and get wherever they need to go without needing to own a car. This means infill. This means density. This means people coming to meetings like meetings that I sit at city councils or county council saying, don't change our neighborhood. We don't like densification. And sprawl is actually more popular in some circles than densification. So that is a big lift that we all need your help with to make sure that we're able to grow in a smart way that is climate friendly. That means more dense housing near light rail and near centers. We've been making a lot of progress on this. We've built over 3,500 new homes or homes in process right near light rail as part of our Sound Transit Affordable Housing Initiative, which has been a really successful one. At the same time, we know that the climate is changing. We know that the impacts are happening. We've talked about smoke season, increased water flows. We need to also focus on resilience. We need to try to minimize the impacts at the same time we get ready for the impacts. And one thing that I've been working on very diligently along with our city partners is water quality. One thing that happens when there's more rain, more water flow, it overwhelms our stormwater systems, it overwhelms our sewers and wastewater systems, and all of the pollution flows into Puget Sound and Lake Washington. So we are working really hard and making investments to try to make sure the system is robust to the kinds of water flows we expect to see in the future. And then, of course, there's community-driven partnerships and activities. I talked about Puget's People for Climate Action. They are a huge force for good in this regard. They hold us accountable. They make sure we are holding ourselves accountable. They partner with us on interesting new projects. I want to also talk about a group called Sustainability Ambassadors. If you don't know them, they're based on Mercer Island, but they work with schools and school-age kids, high school mostly, but middle school too, throughout King County, and they are actually educating and developing the next generation of leaders who will carry this battle on into the future. They're an amazing organization, and we need to build leadership and build community participation. Groups like that are doing exactly what we need to be doing. So it's just a quick overview of some of the things that we're working on right now, but there's a lot of challenges. And I want to start with, but not dwell too much on our own federal government. We see them withdrawing from international efforts, talking about privatizing national parks, pulling back on funding. You're going to hear about our climate office in the executive branch of King County government. They're dependent in part on federal funding. If that money gets pulled back, we can do less. We are all right now, if you all wonder, how are these executive orders that we're all hearing about actually being put into practice? The way they're being put into practice is each year, if you have federal funding, it comes through a grant or it comes through a loan, you have to sign an agreement. And that's how you access the money. The agreements are coming out now with new conditions on them. Conditions like you may not support gender ideology, which is a way of saying you can't be inclusive of trans people or LGBTQ people. I was speaking to the Muckleshoot Tribal Council member recently when they had to fill out their annual agreement for their Head Start program, which they have had funded since the 1960s. They could not use the words Native, Tribal, or Indian. They had to erase themselves from their program in order to be eligible for money. It is policy by keyword. And some of the keywords that are disfavored now, climate, green, all this sort of thing. The federal government is actively hostile. We have to step up and do more locally and more regionally because this work will not get done under the current administration. Saving the Climate Commitment Act at the state level was a huge step and a great win here in this state because that means that we are now, for the first time, really seeing the voters say, we want to do this for ourselves. We're willing to pay for it even, which is so important. But I think the two things I want to say about challenges is, one I have always observed, and that is, it's easy to do the things that are like one-off popular things. Planting 1 million trees makes everybody happy. Volunteers will come out, everybody will plant trees. And we should do it. It is a fantastic strategy. The hard thing, to change the way we live. It seems impossible. It seems impossible to say you shouldn't drive that car the way you drive it anymore, or you shouldn't live in the building the way you're used to living in buildings, or you need to accept much bigger buildings right next door to where you live, and that changes the look and feel of how you are living. Super hard politically, not popular at all, but those are the things we need to do at scale in order to really make a difference. So I'll say, for example, I'm very proud of our work to green our fleet at Metro, to make all the buses electric. It is very expensive. It is very risky because the technology you buy today may not be there 5 years from now, and you've now invested in something you might have to change. And so it's not a sure thing, and it takes a lot of our capital resources. At the same time, if we use some of those capital resources instead to build out new bus stations, to provide new bus service, to get more people to be able to get out of their cars and onto the bus, that is also a climate strategy, but it's not as sexy, and so it's hard to get people to want to focus on that. They want to do all the electrification only. So our balance of what we pay for is something important that I think we need to focus on. Let's see. Sorry, I lost my notes. Okay, and then I want to say I think our challenge really is to paint a picture. Well, if we want to do societal change, you can't say to people, you're going to suffer a lot, but it's for the greater good. Like, let me just tell you, as an elected official, that never plays. Just, please suffer for the greater good. It doesn't work politically. But we can paint a picture of a future that is actually better in lots of ways. yes, the climate will be better. Yes, the environment will be better. And we will be happier, healthier, more economically successful, more socially connected, more equitable. And we can paint a picture that has all of those things in it. But that's our job collectively, all of us, to tell folks it's not about having a dystopian, worse-off future in order to preserve the environment. It's about making everything better in ways that where we can visualize ourselves in a changed, better future. Last thing I want to cover about something we need to focus on is we have to talk about results. And I know I am preaching to court when I say this. We have to talk about results. It is very easy to pick the things that make us look good, and by us I mean in government, that we are doing things, we can check boxes, we can show we've made efforts. But if those efforts really just make very, very small difference, or we're not achieving our ambitious climate goals, then what is the cost benefit ratio for what we're doing really, right? So let me talk about the Puget Sound Regional Council for a moment. This is what some of my friends in government like to call the secret government. It is 4 counties, King, Pierce, Snohomish, and Kitsap. We're required to exist by federal law as an organization to make a regional transportation plan to pass through something like $300 or $400 million until this year, every year in transportation funding. And we have a whole set of policies around that. And one of those policies one set of them is about climate, that we should be investing all of that significant resource in climate-friendly transportation that will have better outcomes. But we do not track the outcomes. We do not report on the outcomes. We don't really focus on them very much at all. And there's lots of reasons why. But so what's the result? If you took a good study, and when I was the president, I forced them to do this. When we studied the list of projects that goes into our long-range plan, all the projects that will get the money, many of them are capacity projects, meaning they're big, washed-out highway road widening projects. Many of them are transit projects. Light rail is a big part of that plan. And then if you look at, well, we have this goal of reducing GHG by a certain amount by a certain year. If we build this plan, will we meet that goal? Spoiler alert, we will not. We will not meet that goal if we build this plan. So I ask, and others ask, it's not just me, should we build this whole plan? Should we not dramatically change the plan so that we do meet the goal? But that would mean not widening the roads. And we are not prepared to do that. The state is not talking about not widening the roads. The region is not talking about not widening the roads. Nobody is having the conversation about maybe living within the carbon footprint we currently have. So that's the hard stuff. The hard stuff is having those conversations about not doing what we've always done because it's not going to work anymore. And the way in my view, the way we get to those hard decisions is by just being very transparent about our results. If we tell everyone we're going to blow right through that, that goal of GHG reduction makes us feel really good, and we're going to blow right through it, and we make that clear, then people have a choice. We either choose to just live with the results of not meeting our climate goals, or we change the way we live. But right now, nobody's feeling that because we're just not, we kind of keep it under the table. So that's the biggest things I think we need to do. I really think we need to focus on results, we need to work at the local level, and we need to paint a vision of the future that people can see themselves in and want to be a part of. And I see the time is just about to expire. I'm so close. I think to close, I just want to say where we all come in. Every single one of us can make a difference in terms of speaking out, putting pressure on people like me at every level of government, right to your local city council members, your county council member, your state legislators. And you don't have to wait until there's like a bill or an email alert that says, tell them now that you need them to vote yes on something. Let us hear from you from time to time. Let us hear, we care about the climate. Thank you for what you're doing, or we want to see more, or there's an event we'd like you to come to. The more we hear from you, the more the issue is like, oh, that's a front of line issue for our constituents, and we need to make sure that it's a front of line issue for us. And we can all serve as an example. I try to do this myself. By the way, it's a little bit of a con when people say, if you just turn down the thermostat, or if you do this or you do that, then individual actions are important, but they will not get us there. Societal actions, removing barriers, setting up incentives so that everybody can do those, can change how they live, That's how we get there. Nevertheless, individual actions matter. I try to be an ambassador for active and clean transportation by being out on my bike and showing that even the gray-haired, older, not very fit anymore lady can do this, you can do it. So if I can do it, you can do it. I'm going to just stop there, and then we can have a few minutes for questions. But I wanted to say, again, close by where I started. Thank you. Thank you for caring. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for being part of the solution.
Questions?
Okay.
I'm Charles Smith. I live in the Seattle area. I never thought I'd ever live to see the bike bill go up to Snohomish County. I was on the bike board and the pad board for 10 years. One other thing, this is not the year of the man, it's the year of the woman.
Woo!
Seriously. And one more thing, where are more people of color and young people?
Yeah.
This is for their future, not mine. I know how to do it.
Yep.
And another thing, please volunteer and listen to each other. If you don't listen, you can't learn anything. We learn from the past mistakes.
Thank you, sir. I want to acknowledge that there are people of color and younger people in the audience. I see you. They're there. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you again for your inspiration and for the support. Okay, my name is Maybin. I run the Bellevue Urban Garden. My question to you is, this is through my experience, and you are the one, who were there when you were just beginning, so thank you.
You're welcome.
My question is, again, centered on young people, because I work a lot with young people. Here's what I've discovered in terms of our involvement to climate action, is every little action, we have our motto at T-Bag, Bellevue Urban Garden, every home a mini farm. Why do we say that? Because we look at each home and say, okay, this is doable. But what we have also discovered is that young people are very, very active and very much interested in climate action. And so I look at the Bellevue School District, which has a student population of over 20,000. And then when I look at King County, it's almost close to 250,000. I'm going, it's a numbers game. So when we get young people involved, the sky is the limit. And so how do we get the city and at King County level to look at what we are doing, whether we are creating impact, and maybe say, I think you guys need a little bit of more support.
Yeah.
Because we are out there, and sometimes we feel that they look at us as if it's just a simple pea patch. It's no longer that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mabin. I want to echo what Mabin said. If you could hear, he was talking about, Mabin has been this incredible organizer and leader who created something called the Bellevue Urban Garden. It's in the Lake Hills area. If you know where the four-way is, right at the Lake Hills Greenbelt, it's that whole part in the southeast part of the corner. And he's right. Efforts like yours, efforts like sustainability ambassadors, some of the work that, say, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the name of the other organization, does with their youth corps. Getting kids, young people want to work on climate resilience and climate action. They care very much about the future, and so giving them their opportunities to do so, then they will come and they will build the future that we need to see. So yes, maybe I've always been a big supporter, and I agree that cities and the counties should be supportive of these community-based efforts to bring young people into the work. Agree.
Buildings are a big piece.
Hi, Bill.
Buildings are a big piece of the problem, and there has been a bill in the legislature for, I think, the last 3 years to do energy scoring on residential buildings, which has not gotten very far. And where it's been discussed, even though it's in the climate action plans for a number of cities, where it's been discussed, I think mostly it comes from staff. It's a, don't go there. Don't tell people what to do. They're not going to be happy about it. And I don't think many of the city councils have actually passed any ordinance that has told anybody what to do. And I wonder how you think about a strategy
Yeah.
to begin to have city council members get a little more backbone.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, this gets right to sort of the theme that I was talking about, which is it's much easier to do voluntary things, to do popular things, than it is to do hard things, to tell people what to do, to really push folks in ways that they might feel uncomfortable with. But there's a key way in which the cities absolutely do tell people what to do, and that's the building codes. The building codes say, and in fact, we updated our building codes recently, at King County anyway, to say you must, when you build new capacity, allow space for a heat pump to be installed. You cannot build homes that couldn't accommodate a heat pump. We're not requiring a heat pump, but you have to allow for it so that the owners can choose to put one in. So it's sort of mandatory. It's true, we do mostly incentives, and we do mostly investments. Part of that's equity. If you required every homeowner to have a battery storage facility, those are expensive. So what about people who can't afford it? What about people who are on fixed incomes? All mandates hit people of color and lower income people harder just by virtue of the demographics of our area. However, I'm with you on the concept. We need to find a way to push the practice forward at scale, and it's hard to do that with just voluntary incentive-based programs. We need to find a way to move it faster and better. And by the way, I think this is a perfect time to acknowledge the presence of our Deputy Mayor, Mo Malakouti. Hi, Mo. I already called Jay out.
So I have I have not actually a question. I have a suggestion for those who are asking, how do we get the county to do more? And that answer partly is elect Claudia,
Oh
King
my
County
goodness,
Executive.
thank you. Let me take it. Actually, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I couldn't see who was speaking, so it was like the whole room was saying it. I just thank you. Let's take a question. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Barb Braun, and there's a couple things. One is Claudia said that taking action was really a community-wide thing, which it is, but all of us should be taking action. In Bellevue, we are woefully behind our 2030 goal. We're at about 11% right now. We're supposed to be at 50% in 5 years. We are not on track to do that. We don't have the actions in place yet to do that. Everybody should be thinking about what they could be doing in their own homes to decarbonize their homes, put in heat pumps, get rid of your gas appliances, electrify your transportation. You should be doing that. Also, we should be voting. 5 of the 7 council positions are open this fall, so we better be voting on climate. If we're not voting on climate and nobody says anything about climate, we're gonna get what we get. So it's getting urgent.
I think that's a fantastic.
Okay, we've got to call it good there, Nan. Thank Claudia Balducci for coming today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I want to say thank you to I want to say thank you to you all, but to the final speaker, because you put a period that could have been part of the speech. Thank you so much. That is what we need to do. We need to be climate voters. Appreciate you. We'll see you out there in November.
Thanks very much, Claudia. Okay, our next speaker is Vicky Raya. Got the name right here. She's the Climate Equity Manager in the King County Executive Office Climate-Focused Office, and that office manages King County's Strategic Climate Action Plan, also called SCAP for short. And that office collaborates with the county departments, frontline communities, and other partners on climate. For nearly 2 decades, Ms. Raya has worked with diverse communities and governments locally and nationally on developing inclusive, community-led education and engagement programs to advance racial equity. And come on up to the microphone, Vicky.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Vicky Raya. I am the Climate Equity Manager in the King County Executive Climate Office. I use she, her pronouns. Thank you. I'll just say next when it's time to change the slides. So thank you all for being here. It's really exciting to see so many of you here out to support and push government to do more and to think about climate, to prioritize climate, and to prioritize the voice of community, which is really what we're doing in the Executive Climate Office. If you can go to the next slide, please. So as I mentioned, I am in the Executive Climate Office, but that was not true when I started my job at King County. So I started at King County in 2021. At that time, the way that we did work in King County was kind of decentralized. So we had a couple of folks in the Executive Office that kind of coordinated like spokes on a wheel with people across different departments that were leading action on climate. Those of us that were the SCAP leads, so we own a section of the SCAP that we develop, were concentrated mostly in the Department of Natural Resources and Parks. However, understanding that climate is becoming an increasingly urgent matter, knowing that this has to be, it really has to be up there along with race and social justice and equity has to be a priority for us to really move forward as a community, as a county-wide community, honestly, globally. The executive at the time, Dow Constantine, required the formulation of an executive climate office and concentrated many of those staff into an office. This was an excellent move because what it does is that it gives us it gives us more ability to provide guidance across departments about how we do the work. We still partner, we still collaborate, we still defer to the expertise of people that are working in the Department of Natural Resources or people that are working in local services, but we are able to guide. So we started with about 20 people. This just happened in 2023, and also have a new climate director. And now in 2025, we have about 35 staff that are full-time in that office that are doing this work. And it's not just the staff in that office. There are, again, many subject matter experts across departments that we call collectively the climate team, and we work across the entire enterprise to really move those goals forward. All right. Thank you. And you know, as Councilmember Balducci was explaining, we've been doing climate work at King County for about 20 years. But we started to formalize that work in 2012 when we published the first Climate Action Plan. At the time, it's 2012, it's the Strategic Climate Action Plan. Many of you may be aware, and many of you may not be aware, that really the way we envision climate action plans is always a greenhouse gas emissions reduction plan. When you write a climate plan, that's what you're doing. Look at many, many, many plans across the county, and we're really looking at how do you reduce greenhouse gas emissions. However, I think you are all aware that is not the only thing that we need to do in order to make sure that we are moving into a livable climate. There is also resilience, right? So preparedness or adaptation. We call it climate preparedness. It's really adaptation, and that is about saying, how do we adapt our natural environment? How do we adapt our built infrastructure? And how do we adapt our communities to be able to adapt to and survive and really thrive in the face of all of these changes? So in 2015, we brought in a new section that was around climate preparedness. So we have greenhouse gas mitigation. How do you reduce these targets? What are the goals? What do we need to get there? What are the actions that get us there? And now what do we do about preparedness? In 2020, we had another innovative push that became part and core of the framework of the Climate Action Plan, and that was embedding a climate justice framework that we call the Sustainable and Resilient Frontline Communities section. That's really the section I lead. What that means is that I support its development, I support its implementation, lead some of the actions myself, and then monitor and track and report on how that work is going. So the SRFC, what's excellent about this is what you'll often see is that you'll see a climate justice framework or a climate equity plan that is kind of like, it's like an appendage to the real plan. So you'll have something like, and here's all the nice ways that we think we could do this work better. What is different here is that this section of the plan is actually in the middle. We have GHG, we have SRFC, which is climate justice, I call it, and I'll explain why it's climate justice and why my title is climate equity in just a second. And then you have preparedness, and each of those sections has actions that we are required to report on to the council, and that we are required to report on to you, the public, the people that pay for this work to happen. And again, as I mentioned, I call myself a climate equity manager because the way that I distinguish this is that equity is really about the fair distribution of resources based on need, right? And justice is more about understanding historical context and understanding that the communities that have consistently been at the margins, that have consistently been exploited, usually have a very keen understanding of what the solutions need to look like that can be very inaccessible when you are not the person that is trying to live and adapt to those circumstances. And so wisdom for how we embed that work in a holistic, comprehensive, rooted way often comes from those very communities that we leave out the most. And that is climate justice, when those communities lead the way. And I call it climate equity because that's really what I do in government, whereas what happens in community is justice. And what I aspire is to translate that into the ways that government provides this work, knowing that the leadership will rest in community. That I wouldn't call myself climate justice if I am in the government, right? It is the leadership of community, similarly to what you're doing. I would say that King County leads on climate, not because we're just awesome people, but because, quite frankly, you are awesome people that are pushing us to do this work. Without your support, we would not be able to do any of this. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. That was not an applause thing, but I appreciate it. So, you know, we recently undertook a huge update. So originally the idea was we have this 2020 climate action plan. It's got over 200 actions, and we've done a lot of really good work. And what we're going to do is just kind of tweak this plan a little bit, right, to make the changes we need to really make sure we're honing in on our goals, because we do have goals. We know what the end game of this situation is. And that's not what happened. And so originally, and this is part of it, right? We wanted a climate action plan in 2025. They span 5 years, so 2020 to 2025, 25 to 2030. We have three priorities, which is let's be more strategic. So make sure that the work that we're doing is really strategic and thoughtful about how we do the work, as well as what it is that we're actually doing, so that we really get those benefits that we're looking for. That we focus on partnerships, because again, we cannot do this alone. We need not just the community members, the advocates, but we also need private partnerships. We also need sister agencies to support all of the work that we are trying to do. King County cannot roll all of this out by itself. And then lastly, that we engage community, that we make sure that, as I mentioned before, the voices of the people that are living the experience are informing the work that we're doing, and that's everyone. But what ended up happening, and what I can tell you now, it's not been approved. It's going to go to council. It will be transmitted May 23rd to council for review. We assume that we'll get potentially a vote and approval, because it kind of goes back and forth. They'll review, they'll have questions, we'll answer the questions or make adaptations. And we're hoping for maybe end of June, sometime July, for that plan to be formally approved so that we can then begin to implement. I think that's my, yeah. It's true, I got a story about that, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so as I was saying, you know, we wanted to really engage community. And so what did that look like? Let's talk about that. Next slide, please. So there was a lot of internal and external engagement that took place in order to cultivate, to develop the 2025 SCAP, what will be going to council. for review and approval. And so you have we have an executive climate office. These are, the department directors of some of the major departments that are really leading or guiding and responsible for some of the work that is connected to climate. So we have this executive climate cabinet. They are part of the people that we engage throughout the process to say, here's the plan, here's where we think we're going, here's some of the big problems, right? Because what we didn't want to do is have any surprises. There are often really gnarly issues that come up as you're trying to do this work, and they need to understand what those issues are because they're going to be responsible for saying, yeah, okay, let's work on that, or this is going to be problematic, can we pivot in this direction? We also have climate team meetings, as I mentioned. It's not just the core team, the SCAP leads, and the people in the Executive Climate Office that are doing this, but we also have people around at all departments that are really invested in this work. And so we meet with them again. Not only did we meet with them, but quite frankly, they were our liaison to taking anything that was coming from some of the meetings that we had, bringing it internally to staff and saying, how do we make an action? How do we turn this into a measurable action? And then, of course, we had general employee engagement. Everybody, we have 16,000 employees at the county. And so what we wanted to say is, hey, here's what we're doing. We gave several presentations. We give these things called CATs, Climate Action Talks, that we do monthly for all staff about what we're up to or what other people are up to, not just ECO, but other departments, and so allowed them to provide feedback on what we were doing that way. We also had, as I mentioned, internal SMEs, subject matter experts that were there every step of the way to say, this is the correct data, this is outdated, we know this doesn't work, do it this way instead. So we had those folks that are working with us. And then you see in the light blue on the right, this is all the external engagement. So the meat of our external engagement were these 3 big workshops we had. Originally, the idea was like SCAP 100. The idea was to invite about 100 representatives across, federal, state, local agencies, partner agencies, maybe workforce development, small businesses, et cetera, that came together with us. And then within those groups, they sort of, there was a cohort that really worked on GHG, a cohort looking at preparedness, and then a cohort of frontline community members really leading what the update should be for the SRFC or the climate justice framework. So we had about 22 members in that group that we recruited that came in and really provided that frontline community perspective and priority for us to build that work. And then we had, no, not quite yet. If you can go back to that. Yeah, so it's a lot. It was exhausting. I am tired, I will tell you. We just submitted this on the 23rd for executive review. Very tired. I have a task force that I work with. This is a really important group. It's the Climate Equity Community Task Force. They are written into the ordinance of the Climate Action Plan, which is really important. These are members of frontline communities that represent BIPOC communities, immigrant, refugee, LGBTQIA, marginalized communities that come together monthly and really my job is to listen to their priorities, take those priorities and turn them into action at the county level, and seek the support, the funding, the approvals, and the programmatic strategies for delivering that work. So they worked with us. We had roadshow meetings, meaning, for example, I didn't meet with 360, but we met with 360 Seattle, for example, and brought our work to them and said, here's where we're going, what are your thoughts? We had our 3 SCAP leads talk, GHG, preparedness, and myself. And then we had K4C, we had public input tool, and then a couple of very poorly attended public meetings, I am sad to say. But you will have an opportunity to see a lot of this work coming up soon. Next, please. And so milestones, where are we now? This work started way back in June, and now, again, as I said, just last week on the 23rd, we were able to submit to executive office staff who are reviewing that package of like over 1,000 pages so that we can then refine that and get it to council by May 23rd. Next. Okay, so what's this 2020 SCAP? What's it done? So I can tell you that, how many of you are aware there is a 2023 biennial report on the work that we've done on the SCAP? Raise your hand if you do. Okay, some of you do. If you don't, and you're like, what have you been doing? And you want to know and you want to see it in writing, every single one of those hundreds of actions, go online, just look up 2023 biennial report, King County SCAP. It'll pop up. You will see it there. It is, have you seen it? I saw you shaking your head. We could talk about that. But if you've seen it, you'll be able to see what we've done there. So if we go to the next slide, please. And again, so there are a lot, and it's actually in this last slide that I can share some of the successes. There's been a lot of successes in the 2020 SCAP. There are many places where we are pivoting, so we're carrying things over that were not done. And there are some things that have been completed, and there are places where we're trying to hit new milestones. But what you're looking at here is this thing called the wedge analysis. And can you raise your hand if you've ever seen this wedge analysis before? Okay, so there's some understanding of what this is. I actually wish I hadn't brought this graphic because I think it's really hard to understand. But what you're looking at, it took me a long time, maybe it's just based on my perspective, it took me a long time to understand this graphic. So what you're looking at here is it's a temporal, right? So 2007 on the far left, and then 2050 on the far right here. And what we're looking at is, to Councilmember Balducci's point, what's it gonna take to get us to the goals that we need in order to stabilize ourselves climate-wise? And so what we know is that we do need net zero emissions by 2050. That needs to happen. And how are we going to get there, right? How do we get to 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions? How does that happen? And what you'll see is that this is just kind of a chart of the actions, the types of actions. So in the green, these are existing state and federal policies where not a lot of local action is required. That's going to get us pretty close to that goal. If we didn't do a whole lot, but now we have these state policies and at one time federal policies, those were going to get us a long way. In the light blue, you have existing state and federal policies that, again, you need significant local action, and that looks like things like the Climate Commitment Act or the Clean Energy Fuel Standards, all of those things that are great in terms of legislation, but they're not going to happen if we do not have coordination to make sure that that happens and know where this work is going. The purple is proposed 2025 SCAP action, so those are the things that we are proposing in the 2025 SCAP. And then last is additional actions that would be needed to achieve those target reductions, and those could be individual actions that folks are taking. All right, next, please. All right, so looking ahead, I think I'm down to the wire here. Awesome. So again, we have the SCAP that we are submitting to council. We've done a lot of this work. So this is something Councilmember Balducci did push us pretty hard on. She said, I don't want a report that goes online that's a hundreds of pages PDF, even though you can click on it so you don't have to scroll anymore. Not that. She said, can we have a dashboard? Can we have something that it actually is showing people what is happening at minimum on an annual basis? And so that's part of what we are submitting in our transmittal package, is saying we have a proposal for what this looks like, what the performance measures are, and what a dashboard can look like. And our goal is to have something up and running by this summer. And then, of course, we have a climate and workforce strategy coming soon. This is really critical because we may have all of these goals around clean energy and building decarbonization. I'm sorry, I know I keep looking at you. I don't mean to. My eye tends to fall one place. But we have all of these goals, and we do not have the workforce to meet those goals. So we need some pathways, we need some strategies, and we need some funding to make sure that's happening. And we are certainly equipped to do that. And certainly this plan is a big part of how we're leading the way on that work. And then if you want to learn more, again, please visit our webpage here. We have a lot of new information, newly revamped. We have a climate action newsletter. a monthly newsletter, an ECO, we call it Executive Climate Office, that worked out beautifully. And we have an ECO Climate Equity newsletter that we also put out monthly, and that's really focused on what are we doing what are resources for frontline communities. We have a heat mitigation strategy, and the person who led much of that work is sitting here now. I'm not gonna point her out, but she is phenomenal and formidable and has done incredible work, so I hope you check that out, and also a wildfire risk reduction strategy. So I'll stop there.
And then for questions.
Hi, I'm David Morton. When you were showing the wedge analysis and you mentioned that perhaps there's a little bit of less emphasis, less expectations we can get from federal support, is it possible that perhaps the green portion of the wedge needs to be reevaluated, especially from 2025 to 2030?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. That's an excellent question. So the analysis for the wedge was really finalized a couple of months ago, right? And that's the work that needs to go into the 2025 SCAP. But you are right that if this becomes outdated, this is not what we will hold ourselves to. We are working through the K4C, the Keene County Climate Collaborative, who are also wanting to do individual wedge analyses for their cities, right? And so the idea is that we're using the most reliable data available to make the decisions that we need to make. We do have about $70 million in federal funding, and the truth is that that funding, although we have received the funding initially, we have a team, we have a pretty strong team of a pretty strong prosecuting attorney's office, and we have attorneys that are working to ensure that we receive some of that funding because it is obligated. We did sign contracts, and we have made some initial wins. We don't know what the future of that work will be. So yes, you're right. We need to rethink, and we don't know what that looks like. Does it look like potentially a climate levy? Right? Like, is that what it's going to look like? Potentially. Do people love being taxed? Absolutely not. Do we do it anyway? Absolutely we do. And that may be one of the options there. So, good point. Yes. Oh, I'll wait till. Hold on, please.
Yeah, my name is Jonathan Harrington from Mercer Island. And so it looks like there's just been a slight decrease in overall greenhouse gas emissions since 2007. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the biggest drop that we had was from 2007 was after 2019, right? That was like post-pandemic. So post-pandemic, during the pandemic, we had a huge drop. And although we have overall a slight drop, there is a lot more work that we need to do, and the majority of that really is in buildings, right? So like 40% of our GHG emissions come from our outdated building infrastructure, and so those building codes become really important, getting heat pumps into homes, electrifying appliances, all those things become really important, and 50 million of those funds, federal funds that we received, that's what they're focused on.
So I was wondering what the per capita emissions reduction has been. It must be obviously much bigger, which is progress.
So I think I wrote it down. I hope I did. Because GHG is it's not the thing that I track, but yes. Let me just make sure that I have it here. Told you there was a reason why I was a little nervous. Okay, so let's see. So individual per capita were 12.9 metric tons of CO2 in 2007, and in 2023 they're 10.7. So I'm glad I wrote that down.
Yes, hi. My name is Mark. I'm part of the ECAM group here at East Shore. As a member of ECAM, people have turned to me and say, well, Mark, help me with what I need to know to do handle my own wedge chart. They don't call it that, but so are there tools that people for their own household can do what
oh my gosh,
the cities are doing? You know, they'll track your car, your furnace, all the things that go into it, so they can be part of that last part of the wedge that it's the everything else category?
Yeah, I think there are tools at the county level. I think it's not just the county that put out tools. You can just search for ways to minimize your carbon footprint. I think there are a lot of tools out there. I know that King County also recently did, in 2022 maybe, we finalized a GHG consumption analysis, and so we were trying to understand how do our consumption patterns contribute to GHG, and with that put out a toolkit around what can you do. I think, I don't know if that's finalized or published yet, but we'd be happy to share it with you if you would share it with folks, if we can find it. And also, other things that people should know is if King County Public Health has a ton of tools. They're very focused on health, but they're really focused on healthy indoor air quality. And a lot of the things that you can do there are correlated with things that you can do to be more climate friendly. There's just there is a wealth of information available, but you're right that it's about how do we make that easy for people to access. That's really the thing. You can start by following King County Eco. If you are on Instagram, please follow it. We just got a communications manager in December, and in that time, she's got a blog, she's got a newsletter, she's got an Instagram, she's got us on LinkedIn, and she's publishing left and right all the time to make everything we do as accessible as possible.
Last question. Yeah, my name's Tom Hageler. I'm with 350 East Side. Is there some place to get a feel for the split in funding being spent between resilience projects and reduction projects?
Yes, I think so, and I don't know where. So all the information that we have is going to be public, right? So you should know what the funding is that is going into this work. I would say that the vast majority of the funding is going to emissions reduction. That's really where the feds put the money with the Inflation Reduction Act. It really was all about emissions reduction, clean air. So the vast majority of the money is going there. I would go so far as to say at minimum 80% of the funding goes there. We have some funding through other, like NOAA, for example, that is funding our climate resilience work, some federal dollars, but again, a lot of that federal funding is already being impacted. And I know, I mean, I don't know if this is where you're going, but I would say that reductions and resilience are equally important.
Let's have a big hand for Vicky Raya. Good job. Thanks very much. So I need to apologize to the next speaker for somehow a clerical error was made in your handouts for today, and her name was left off, but I assure you she's important. Her name is Christine Cooley. She's the executive director of the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency. That agency works in 4 counties: King, Pierce, Kitsap, and Snohomish County. Their work is directed at protecting public health, improving neighborhood air quality, and reducing our region's contribution to climate change. The agency has recently drafted a regional climate action plan. First time they've done that, I believe. And Ms. Cooley has over 20 years of dedicated service to environmental protection, and she carries a deep commitment to addressing the severe impacts of air pollution on overburdened communities. So please welcome Christy Cooley.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christine Cooley. I am the Executive Director of the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency, but among climate friends, please call me Chrissy. I think this timing, this setup with these speakers worked out really well because Councilwoman Balducci was able to share the vision and the urgency for why we're talking about the things we're talking about today. Vicky did such a great job going over the King County plan. I'm going to talk to you about the regional climate action plan. And the most important thing I want to tell you is that this is not about just another plan or a competition. This is about getting all of the existing climate action plans. This region is so fortunate to have decades of history of good climate action planning. We're trying to compile that all into one comprehensive plan that then we can leverage for greater resources, economies of scale, and getting those decisions down to the local levels. So I originally had a bone to pick that I was going to be the last person over these two powerhouses, but I get it now, so thank you. Thank you very much. John, could you change it? Thanks. So I'm just curious, how many of you have heard of the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency? Oh, that warms my heart. Okay, fantastic. Oh, yeah, good. So we have actually a new vision and mission statement that we work together with our staff and our community members as part of our 2023 strategic plan. And our new vision statement is healthy air, climate, and environmental justice for the benefit of all people in the Puget Sound region. And our mission is to preserve, protect, and enhance air quality and public health, enforce the Clean Air Act, support policies that reduce climate change, and partners with communities to do this work equitably. So it's a really intentional choice that we put equity and environmental justice forefront in our vision and mission. I think local action, Councilwoman Balducci did such a great job talking about how local action matters now more than ever, and especially when we're talking about environmental justice. That's something in the origin story of the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency. We were founded in 1967 as a result of, I believe, the environmental justice and civil rights movement to address the air pollution that we were facing. So with that, Court already mentioned it. Sorry, there's a typo on this slide. The how will your input be used should say strategic plan. Will you go back? Thank you. So in our new strategic plan, we have 4 really ambitious goals. We are on track with all of these except for the climate goal. So we are aiming to reduce air pollution overall by 20%. We're cutting socioeconomic disparities in air pollution exposure by 50%. Cutting cancer risk from air toxics by 50%. We know from our air toxic studies that that's largely due to diesel exhaust, especially in this particular region where we stand right now. And to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by half. So we do that by serving this jurisdiction in a variety of roles. We are regulators, we're educators, we're technical experts, and the most important role I feel for reaching the scale that we need to reach is convener collaborator. So next slide. I was going to take this opportunity just to share a few more resources that the agency has to offer. All of you are so involved, and I hope you spread the word. If you go to our website, you can find real-time live monitoring data across the 4 counties. Every single person that lives in the Puget Sound region lives within 4 kilometers of an air monitor sensor, which is great for ambient air. We have a sensor lending library, so if you're doing community events, if you know any kids that you'd like to work with them, you can get a sensor for free from the agency to see real-time monitoring data. We do have a sponsorship program. We have a speakers bureau, like I'm speaking you today. You're welcome to invite people who know much, much more about this topic than me to your events. We have a wood stove removal incentives program, and we have other incentive programs like with our trucking community to help make decarbonization more affordable to everyone. And then we also take complaints if you have air quality concerns, and we'll follow up on those complaints. But what I'm here to talk to you about today is our Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program and its primary deliverable, the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. So again, not to take the place of any existing plan, it's in fact just built up of all existing plans in the region to be the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. Next slide. So the agency received a grant from the Federal Climate Pollution Reduction Grant, CPRG, in 2023 to lead regional climate action planning. Because we do serve the 4 counties, we were uniquely situated to be able to do this type of coordination. And originally, the grant went to the top 67 MSAs, Metropolitan Statistical Areas. Here, that's Bellevue, Tacoma, Seattle. But because we already serve the 4-county region, we asked the EPA if we could kick out the boundaries to be more inclusive and have a more comprehensive climate action plan. So they allowed us to do that, and now the agency is still in the development. We haven't finished it yet. We're still in the development of that plan for the Puget Sound region, and it'll be completed by December 1st, 2025. All right, next slide. Thank you. So one of our goals is to leverage the planning process for enhanced regional collaboration. We have teams of experts involved in the planning process. What you see here is sort of an org chart of how this is all working. The agency is coordinating, we are not leading. We are relying on local leadership from our steering committee members that are from each of the 4 counties and the largest cities in each of those 4 counties. And then most importantly, we have these technical working groups that are the subject matter experts that are providing input into the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. We're fortunate to have people like Vicky, who served on the equity team, many other experts contributing to getting the facts right of this plan. Next slide. So the goal of the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan is to create a long-term regional plan to achieve climate goals, align with and complement state and local plans, build regional collaborations for collective climate action plans, and I was adamant about putting this one in because I don't want this to be about the plan. A lot of work has gone into building these collaborations, and once we get that plan, we want to continue that collaboration and implementation, because that's what's really going to matter, is moving the needle and getting the reductions we want to see. And then make our region more competitive for grant applications. Even though the federal environment is what it is, there's a lot of good federal opportunities still out there, and the higher quality plan that we can have in place, it's going to make us more attractive. I think, I'll speak personally, I've seen a lot of good state dollars go towards projects like Claudia was talking about that are really feel-good projects, and they might have done some good things, but did they achieve the highest and best use that those dollars could do? This plan can be a resource for community members, for jurisdictions, for anyone in a decision-making role for funding to look off the menu and say, what will have the highest impact and how can we collaborate to get the best use of that funding? So the CCAP's purpose is to identify a comprehensive list of climate strategies. We want to hear from all of you about which of those strategies we should implement and how those strategies should be implemented in your neighborhood. The community perspective is very valuable to us. We actually just wrapped a series of community events in each of the 4 counties, and a little bit later I'm going to share with you what the future ways to get involved are. All right, next slide, please. So there's many other climate action plans happening across King County. Our goal with the CCAP is to complement and support, never replace the climate planning that's already been done and continues at the state and local level. So for example, the state is also doing a comprehensive climate action plan, and that's going to examine strategies and policies that can be enacted at the statewide level. That means things like updating statewide building codes or implementing a zero emissions vehicle mandate. Cities and counties then evaluate local needs and create programs to meet state goals. For example, even though a state may implement a zero emission vehicle mandate, it's often up to local governments to actually implement those and see what makes sense for them, right down to where EV charging stations are going in. So at the regional level, we're coordinating among these different levels of action. The CCAP is the first regional climate plan for the Puget Sound. Regional agencies like ours can help to promote a collaborative approach to implementation, which can make us more competitive for funding and more effective. The agency and other partners also coordinate with tribal governments to align plans where there's opportunities to do so. So to summarize, the state, region, tribes, and counties and cities, we all have the unique opportunities to implement climate action, and the regional CCAP is filling the existing gap for regional planning and complements and builds on other planning at the state and local level. Next slide, please. Okay, all that to say, here's what's actually going to be in it. First, the CCAP will summarize baseline data on greenhouse gas emissions in our region. This helps us understand where our emissions currently come from and how they're expected to change over time. It will identify targets for reducing our regional greenhouse gas emissions. It'll create a comprehensive set of climate actions to meet our targets. It'll help analyze and prioritize community benefits, especially for communities that are disproportionately impacted by or vulnerable to the effects of climate change. And finally, it'll include an analysis of how the regional workforce will need to evolve and grow to implement the actions in the plan. And I want to be really explicit. There's an elephant in the room that this was an EPA federally funded grant. There's federal uncertainty. At this time, we have no reason to think that the funding will be pulled altogether, but regardless, the agency sees the value in this regional plan for all the reasons I've already explained, and we're committed to seeing this through. We are so close with this regional plan that's going to have such benefit at the state level. So we're going to see this through regardless of the federal uncertainty. Okay, next slide. So we're working with many partners as we develop the CCAP. That includes cities and counties, subject matter experts, utilities, transit providers, community organization, ports. So just to reiterate, very collaborative process. I'm sure you know people who are involved in this, and we want to hear your voice as well. Next slide. So here we have a snapshot of the region's emissions and where they come from. The largest emitting sector is transportation, which is about 40% of total greenhouse gas emissions. The transportation sector includes emissions from all vehicle types. Then buildings, as the second highest emitting sector, account for 39% of total emissions across the region. This sector includes emissions from powering residential, commercial, and industrial buildings, the electricity they use, as well as fuels like natural gas that power appliances like furnaces, water heaters, and stoves. Next up is land use, which accounts for 13% of regional emissions. This sector includes emissions from agriculture and the loss of natural landscapes. And then finally is refrigerants, which accounts for 5% of regional emissions. This sector includes emissions from equipment that uses refrigerant gases, air conditioners, even heat pumps, and larger industrial equipment. And then last, we have waste and wastewater, which accounts for 3% of the regional emissions. So now we'll look ahead of how we can achieve our regional targets for greenhouse gas emission reductions. Vicky had a very similar wedge analysis in her presentation. They're very useful tools. And that was a great question about what will we do if the federal policies don't come to fruition. It's just going to gain the wedge of what we need to figure out with our local planning. So this graphic shows how emissions may change over time given different policy scenarios. On the horizontal axis, we have time in years, and on the vertical axis, we have amounts of greenhouse gas emissions. So the solid black line on the left represents historical greenhouse gas emissions. The dash red line at the bottom of the chart illustrates the emission reduction targets we saw on the last slide. And the dashed black line, number 1 on the top of the chart, shows how emissions are predicted to grow if we make no reduction efforts at all. The top green wedge, number 2 on the chart, shows the anticipated greenhouse gas reduction impacts of existing federal and state policies, such as fuel efficiency standards for passenger vehicles. And the blue line right below that shows where emissions will be as a result of those policies. And then the yellow wedge, number 3 on the chart, shows us what additional reductions would need to be made if we're going to meet our 2050 emission reduction target of 50%. This modeling shows us how much additional effort is needed to meet our climate goals, which leads us to our task, closing the emissions gap with additional reduction strategies so that we can meet our climate goals. Next slide. I actually think Vicky did a better job covering some of these specific sectors, so I'm going to move ahead and skip this slide so I can tell you about the timeline for the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan and how you can get involved. So last winter, we drafted the list of greenhouse gas emission reduction strategies and actions. There was a priority climate action plan, given the timing with the federal administration. That priority climate action planning is what helped result in the $50 million grant that King County was the recipient of. I can say, I don't have it in writing, but I was told that it was the best written application in the entire country, so, yeah. Pretty awesome stuff, and it goes to show that our region really does have the experience and the decades of good climate planning to build from. So like I said, we just wrapped a workshop in each of the counties to inform guidance on how strategies should be implemented at the county level. Those were very well attended. We got some great feedback. We're sorting through it now, making adjustments in the plan, and in the summer, we'll finalize the emission reduction strategies and compile the draft comprehensive climate action plan. So in the fall, we'll invite your feedback on the draft CCAP through our online open house and compile the final CCAP document, which is due to EPA in December. So there is no single entity that will carry out this plan. There's no single funding source available for implementation. Our success depends on collaborative actions from many partners and getting the buy-in of this being the regional plan that will guide efforts. So if you'd like to stay involved, next slide, thank you. You can join our mailing list to get updates on the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. You can take the survey and provide your own feedback. You can email us directly, visit the program website for CCAP or anything that the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency does. I really want to thank you all for being here today. I think the conversations at the local level are really where it starts, where the rubber hits the road. So I'm happy to be here today, and then I'll end with a shameless plug. We're also doing an art contest for any artists who would like to have art contributed into this CCAP. It's a fun thing, and we want to show the vibrancy of our region, not just the wedge analysis. So with that, I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Your presentation was excellent. That's the way a presentation should be done. In fact, the last two, yours was and the lady. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Take that.
Right here. Hi there. Chris Randalls with the organization Complete Streets Bellevue. It's one that really cares about transportation and land use. And notice that your pie chart called out land use as kind of a source of emissions. I guess when we talk about land use, we think about it less about kind of agricultural and landscaping and more about how our cities and region are organized to encourage more efficient transportation, more efficient land, housing patterns, et cetera. So really curious, like at this regional level, how will this plan kind of incorporate actions that account for like more sustainable land use practices, and how will this plan kind of interface with reviews of cities' individual comprehensive plans as they get implemented over the next few years?
So I'll say we're right in the middle of it, so please submit that question. That's a great question. So we're taking all of the existing climate action plans, and fortunately, climate action plans across the 4 counties, a lot of them have measures for land use preservation, reforestation throughout. So we're taking those in and we're trying to find where they match up, like where we could find partnerships to get those economies of scale for programs in all variety of areas. And then wherever we're missing the mark, that's what we need to fill in now of we got to fill it out. We got to figure out some sort of strategy to get from here to there. But that's a really great question. I'd actually like to talk to you more about it.
Hi, my name's Tasha Brown, and I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more about how you're going to keep moving forward despite what's happening at the federal level, and then how all of us can help with that.
I'm like a little bit nervous, if I'm being totally honest. I have a bold idea. So there's a lot of funding in Washington State. Washington State gets it, and they're working hard. And things like the Climate Commitment Act that voters turned out for, that's generating revenue. And that's also not the only funding for climate policy, too. The thing that, and I'll just speak as me, not as the agency, the thing that is so frustrating to see, it was when you see really well-intentioned projects spending money on things that we know, we have the science, that it's not the best use of funding. So I think the benefit of using this comprehensive climate action plan as a menu is having our decision makers have to order on menu for the things that we've prioritized to have the biggest difference. Does that make sense?
Hi, Ann Fletcher here. I wondered how much of the transportation, 40%, was airplane, and we suddenly had to add that into our climate action plans. We had never done that locally before, so I'm really curious about that.
I do not have a magic notebook like Vicky does, but if you email me, I could follow up. The agency has a wonderful team of experts, and I can't take credit for their calculations.
In Bellevue, it's 15% of the total emissions pie currently, if that helps. Other questions?
Do you know? King County is 21%. Magic notebook coming through.
Hi, I'm Claudia Hershey. This is a question to either of you. Do you have, are there measures of effectiveness for equity to measure whether or not these investments actually are going into the areas that are low income, and using actual data, like geographically, these are the low income or the higher, those that are receiving higher pollutants. For example, of the 1 million trees that were planted, were they planted in those areas? Were any street trees planted in White Center? And I'm a transportation professional. I could talk about transit for a really long time if you wanted it. And there's a lot of conflict of interest, shall we say, about the distribution of transit service.
I'll speak, and then you should definitely add to this. I'm so glad you add this. I can't believe I forgot to mention a talking point in here. Some of the requirements of the CCAP are to, one, have a workforce development analysis, and two, have a low-income disadvantaged communities analysis. So where are the benefits, not just the funding, but where are the benefits going to show up in LIDAC communities? Unfortunately, the EPA has since decided that that's no longer a requirement of the CCAP, and we've been directed, along with all the other 67 groups doing comprehensive climate action planning, that we should use more useful analysis like economic development. We are not doing that. We're sticking with the LIDAC analysis. And I can't believe I forgot to mention that, so thank you so much for saying that. Do you want to add?
You all hear me? And I don't think you're asking specifically for the county, but I can speak to county. And really, you know, when I talked about, we received the $50 million four-county grant, and that is really about building decarbonization. So it's about a whole suite of strategies to support decarbonizing buildings, improving electrification. And what was interesting about the way that grant was developed, I did not write it. I was a contributor along with many other people, but I was not the lead. We have phenomenal staff that led that work that are brilliant and incredible. Credit to them. But one of the things that we decided to do is that we said, here, it's kind of like she was talking about the menu, like what are the biggest GHG emissions, right? Like where is that happening the most? We know buildings are, so let's have some strategies. We had a set of strategies to vote on, and we said, although we could actually we could reduce emissions, GHG emissions, a bit more if we took a different strategy. What we're going to do is we're going to focus on those communities that are going to have the hardest time affording some of these improvements and electrification improvements, and we're going to focus also on the most vulnerable populations. And by that I mean socially vulnerable, because I'll tell you that communities of color do not like being called vulnerable. They have a lot of strengths, a lot of power. They know how to pivot, extremely strategic, bring a lot of wisdom. Not vulnerable, but there are communities that are, right? And we're talking about young children. We are talking about seniors. We are talking about people on fixed incomes. We're talking about people that are living in housing that is not up to par, naturally occurring affordable housing. We call that NOAA, right? So think about like, you know, that building owned by a landlord who maybe doesn't put a lot of money into maintenance or making sure that this is a weatherized building. So what we did is prioritize that the funding that will go towards specifically those communities, those geographic areas, and that there will be a bunch of strategies. There will be some grants, there will be some low interest loans, and then there will just be infusions of tax credits, et cetera, for communities.
We have time for one more question.
Hi there, my name's Devin. I'm from Redmond. I'm also part of People for Climate Action. And I had a question about, we talk a lot about the emissions reductions of electrifying our buildings and our homes. One thing that I'm hearing a lot from families and for myself, one of the things that led us to decarbonize our home is the indoor air quality effects of methane and the other pollutants that are in natural gas. And so I'm just wondering what you're doing to address those in the plan, and also community safety for the infrastructure too. We had a 7 million cubic feet of methane leaked in December near Union Hill. And so those are things that are not only health, but air quality issue, but safety issue for our community. So are you addressing those in the plan? Thanks.
So the plan is really about prioritizing climate actions, greenhouse gas emissions, and as part of this weighted decision matrix of how we're prioritizing, it includes the LIDAC analysis, the workforce development analysis. I could tell you all the things we're doing for just Puget Sound Clean Air Agency, because this is just one of our programs where we're addressing public health as the primary concern. For the climate action plan, it's really greenhouse gas emissions first.
Well, let's give a round of applause and appreciation for Christine Cooley. And before you hear the last crazy speaker, let's thank these sane speakers for coming away a fair distance in some of your cases to be with us today. One more round for both of them. Okay, I know you're anxious to get on with the rest of your day, but if you're able, I hope you can suffer through the next 20 minutes with this next crazy speaker. And here's a little background on him. I'm a local climate action activist. I'm the founder and leader of People for Climate Action, and we have chapters in 13 different cities in King County. We're only in King County, and we work with city governments to encourage, prompt, really push our city governments to reduce their greenhouse gases in accordance with the commitments that they made quite some time ago, back in 2014, most of them. I also work in concert with other environmental organizations from time to time, and I've had a hand in drafting and advancing some important legislation relating to climate at the state level. And I've got a professional history of overseeing the design and construction of commercial buildings for longer than I want to admit. So, next slide. Everybody that I know lives a pretty busy life. And in our busy work and play, we don't often find time to stop and think about how what we're doing every day, what our habits are doing in changing the world around us. From time to time, we hear about storms and fires and high temperatures at different isolated, specific locations around the planet. But what we don't hear, or at least we don't hear very often, is what's happening incrementally day after day after day after day everywhere. It's happening all over the place, and those incremental, small climate changes are having huge, huge impacts. And we need to keep that in mind because we don't often, at least, see the big events, the news events happening around us in our immediate Puget Sound region. So I got a question for you. How many of you are familiar with these decals? Yeah, that's a good sign. Next slide. How many of you saw this on Frontline this past week? Well, if you didn't, go find it, take a look. It's a news story that's not immediate news. It's been building, and continues to build about how the coastal communities in Alaska, which are mostly indigenous communities, are being severely impacted and having to relocate because of climate change. And it's because of two main reasons. The permafrost that's all around them is melting, turning to slush and eroding or eliminating the foundations that they've built their homes on. And the other piece that's impacting them is seas are rising and storms are becoming more fierce. They're severely impacted, and that's every day. And they're having to change where they live as well as their lifestyles. In 2022, this special was on Nova about Arctic sinkholes. And it was actually replayed again this past week as well. You can find it if you go Google it. The small print there in dark blue points out what this whole program shows you, and that's the fact that this permafrost thawing is a feedback mechanism for more global warming. And it's happening all over the Arctic. It's contributing substantially to our greenhouse gas emissions, and it's caused by the warming that humans created that's thawing that permafrost. It's got a lot more information than I have time to cover. Pretty eye-opening. I suggest you go look at it, because the reality is climate change is not steady and linear. It's exponentially increasing. And there's going to come a point, if we haven't already gotten there, it's hard to measure and tell, there's going to come a point where we cannot stop it, because enough of the permafrost will keep melting and other feedback mechanisms will keep happening to keep the whole world warming regardless of what we do. So this is urgent. This is now. This is on the cusp of being out of our control. And that's why this year, 2025, is so critical to us locally, because the state, the region, the county, and most of our cities are all updating their climate action plans. Next slide. Who's responsible for these problems? Okay, I think you know the answer. So what are we going to do about it? Well, we all know and have heard probably of the K4C, the King County Cities Climate Collaboration, that got started back in 2012. A lot of cities signed on to it in 2014. Great drama, great rhetoric. We're going to cut our greenhouse gas emissions 25% by 2020, 50% by 2030, 80% by 2050. The statement I just gave you is in the red type here that's on their website. And this is what the, next slide, this is what that looks like graphically, so that you have a picture of what the plan was. Next slide. So how are we doing? Well, not so great. Seattle is one of the cities that's tracking their greenhouse gas emissions. In their latest report, 2022, 3 years ago, their latest report shows that the emissions dipped due to COVID primarily in 2020, but in 2022, when they checked it out again, it's back on the rise. You project that trajectory from 2020 to 2022 on into the future, and most likely their emissions are at the same level, if not worse, than they were when they started tracking in 2008. Next slide. Bellevue's been doing the best job of any city I've seen in the county, and I've looked at most of the websites, in tracking emissions and reporting them. But the latest report they have is from 2023, so it's 2 years old. It shows that steady rise of emissions since the COVID. The blue line is the line we're supposed to be on to hit the 2050 goal. And if you project what's happened since COVID as a trend, here in Bellevue, we're probably getting pretty close to, if not going beyond, where we started measuring in 2011. Next slide. Here's what Bellevue shows as the different sectors that are causing greenhouse gas emissions. And just like we've heard from the region, we've heard from the county, and we hear from nearly every other city that's tracking this stuff, most of the problem is in our existing buildings, not future buildings, which building codes deal with. We're talking about existing buildings, most of which are still going to be here, probably 80% will still be here by 2050. So we got to deal with these existing building problems. And then the other sector of prominence, and orange, is the transportation sector. Fortunately, we did have state action that's going to cut down the magenta or purple colored existing building problem, because Puget Sound Energy is required to clean up the grid. So it's no longer heavily powered by fossil fuel generating equipment. So that wedge that I've circled there with a blue circle will probably go away by 2050. But I gotta tell you, I've looked at these wedge analysis. I've been looking at this stuff for far too long. I'd like to retire, actually. But I've been following this stuff for more than 20 years. And I look at these wedge analyses, which the county and cities started publishing back in the early 20s, and 2020 was the first one probably that I saw. It's somebody guesstimating what might happen if all these programs come to reality and get funded. They get revised every few years because, oh, it didn't really happen that way. And I got to tell you, now that the federal government is pulling the plug on the federal level work, we're a long, long way from hitting our emissions targets. And we got to do more locally, as every one of our speakers has said so far today. Next slide. By the way, what's happening in other cities? Well, a few cities report their emissions every 2 or 3 years. Those that do report have pretty similar pie charts to what Bellevue has. That's probably because all of the other cities except Seattle have Puget Sound Energy for their power source. But many of our cities, especially the smaller ones, aren't doing any emissions reporting at all. Next slide. So, why aren't our local climate action plans working? You know, there's a temptation to put a target on the back of all of our public officials. But they respond to us. They work for us. They do what the public asks them to do. So, these are the hurdles that I see they have, and I get to talk with a lot of them and the people for climate action work and the other organizations that I work with. There are 4 main hurdles. I need to be careful in what I say here, because there's nobody that I know in public office or public staff that's stupid and that isn't working hard. However, I've spent far too much time, along with a lot of people and people for climate action, doing research on what can be done and what will be most impactful, and they're not doing it for the most part. And that's in part due to these 4 things I've got here. One of them is they don't have that research background. They haven't looked at these things and done the analysis to figure out, okay, if we do this action, how much greenhouse gas emissions reduction are we going to have? Now, they're talking about doing that, and they're doing their updates. We got to emphasize that and get our voices heard about they need to do more research on what's most effective. Another big part of their challenge is there's a willpower problem, especially from the elected officials. They got to get reelected every year, and they listen to the public voice, and the public voice just isn't strong enough to give them the backbone to do those heavy lifting, difficult actions that need to happen. The third and still big challenge is there's not enough money, not enough resources. And how do they get more? We gotta get them to find more, and maybe we even have to pay more in our taxes and our revenue streams. Otherwise, it's not going to happen, because these efforts take staff and take resources. And number 4 on the list is important too. There's a lack of, I think, this is just my personal view, I just don't think we've got enough attention paid to the desperate and unequal treatment of the impacts that people are having, because different people in different communities, different backgrounds, different income levels, are experiencing different levels of challenge, and they're going to need some financial aid as well as technical aid and guidance on what they need to do. Next slide. Nope, I was going to say the one before that, that slide that he just showed, well, are we missing the next slide? The next slide was a question, who's to blame? And here's the answer. It's us, folks. Next slide. We need to build up our climate advocacy strength. There's some good organizations represented here, others that maybe aren't at the table today, that we need to collect together and get some uniformity around and get some strong advocacy going. Next slide. And we need our cities to band together and pool resources. Next slide. A good example is the Energy Smart Eastside program. Sarah Phillips from Bellevue is here today, and you can find out more about that program. But if you're not aware, 6 cities, along with King County, got together in sponsoring this heat pump program that's promoting heat pumps. But I got to tell you, it's way, way underfunded compared to what the need is. So it's a step in the right direction, but we got a lot more stairs to climb to make that an effective program. So, next slide. People for Climate Action back in 2019 and 2020 did a review over 9 months. We had a task force of about 13, 14 people researching what actions were being done all across the country. And we collected all those. We found over 300 different climate-related actions, and we cataloged them. And it's not surprising that the county has found over 200 actions and put them in their previous version of their strategic climate action plan. The trouble is, most of those actions are not very effective, and they're not doing the right thing. So, early this year, actually it started late last year, we got a task force together again, next slide, and People for Climate Action came up with a list of 12, just 12 actions that all our cities, county, anybody with a jurisdiction needs to take to bring down emissions to the level that needs to happen and happen rapidly. There's 12 actions. I'm not going to take time to go through all 12 of them. You can start to read them here, but we focused on where the emissions are showing up in the reports that we get from our cities, the existing buildings problem, and the transportation problem. That's where all these actions are. And you can see the transportation ones there. And the last 2 of the 12 are a big education effort. We got to get people to understand these things. That's a big, big lift, and we got to find the funding to do it. So, you can help make it happen. We got to get a whole lot more people than are in this room. So, if you're motivated, find another 6 dozen, 20, 40 people that you know on board with this idea and get them to sign up and join the organizations that you see represented here today. By the way, I forgot to mention, we've got 20 copies of our 12 critical city climate actions written up in some detail, 4 pages, that are over on the People for Climate Action table if you want to get those and take them with you. And if that stack of copies runs out, just leave your name with the folks at the table and we'll get it emailed to you. Okay, I heard the buzzer, and we didn't allow time for questions. I'll stick around if you want to ask me questions, but we want to give you time to circulate and see these tables. So thanks for listening. I appreciate you all being here. Develop that muscle, will you?
Thank you all for coming. Please take a look around at the tables. There's lots of food and drink and food out there, so please help yourself and come around. You can eat and drink here as well. So thank you all, and keep well.